Rob Dillingham comes straight out of a mixtape to be a lottery pick in the 2024 NBA Draft. This is Floor and Ceiling. Let's break him down. Kentucky guard Rob Dillingham is one of the most interesting NBA prospects in recent memory. Dillingham's talent level is incredible. At around 6 feet tall, he's a bucket, plain and simple, and he's just electric with the ball in his hands. The Wildcats have been using Rob as a spark plug off the bench, and he is averaging 14 points and 4 assists on high usage, encouraging volume from 3, and tantalizing self-creation at the basket and from the mid-range. With Dillingham, there's no other place to start but with how he puts the ball in the hoop. The Kentucky guard has deep, fearless range, and he gets into his pull-up super quickly out of dribble combinations or using a screen. Dillingham simply thrives in early shot clock situations. He is shifty with his handle and very sudden with his deceleration. Rob is lightning quick when he starts to get downhill, and while it may not seem like it, I think he's more or less always in control. He can instantly change directions or speed, and really, he's able to pull up whenever. This applies even from weird angles or seemingly random halts, so it's very tough for defenses to read him. So far in his freshman season, Dillingham is shooting 38% from 3 on 10 triples per 100 possessions, and he is making 48% of his 2-point jumpers with only about 1/4 being assisted. Clearly, there's a reason why Dillingham goes by Rob with the shifts. He can take a defender on off the dribble whenever, and he's very self-reliant when it comes to creating his own shot in a way that calls back to the basketball of decades ago. However, there is also an uncertainty surrounding Dillingham's shot selection. We've been tracking Rob since his high school days on the channel, and it's true, he has gotten much better at picking and choosing his moments. In the past, the question was whether Dillingham could play genuine team basketball at the highest level. This was the case even through last year when he joined the Overtime Elite program and he was a walking Instagram highlight. This year at Kentucky, I think he's answered that question with a huge yes. Rob no longer gets lost in his own sauce as much, and he's much more diligent about the shots that he does take. But still, there are plenty of times when Dillingham makes eye-rolling decisions. He'll bring the ball up and take a wild shot without anyone else getting a touch, or he'll randomly rise into a heavily contested jumper that gets completely smothered. This season, Dillingham has more or less maintained his efficiency. His 56.7% true shooting is fine when you consider his high usage off the bench and his style of play, but generally, I think his shot selection is still a question as he heads into the NBA. Now, it's not so much about whether Dillingham can adjust to a more team-based style, but it's more about whether Dillingham can be a starter, whether he's best coming off the bench like at Kentucky, how much freedom his next team will give him, because I don't think you want to sap Dillingham's creativity, and whether his college experience was a one-off and he might revert to his old habits. Like I've been saying though, Rob deserves credit for his shift in mentality at Kentucky. He's completely bought into what John Calipari is doing, and he's been one of the best players on one of the best Kentucky teams in recent memory. A big part of this is what he's been doing away from the ball. Whereas before, Rob was only effective in a ball-dominant role, he's proven that he can also be dangerous spotting up on the perimeter. Dillingham is a very good shooter with a quick release and excellent touch, even if he is unorthodox with how loose he is and how much his legs can swing on his jumper. In turn, all of this also makes the Overtime Elite product more scalable. He'll be able to play next to a bigger point guard or wing-sized playmakers in the NBA. One thing to keep an eye on for the rest of the season is that Dillingham has gradually cooled off from 3. He's still at 38%, and I trust his outside shooting, but if he takes a big dip, it might make NBA teams question him just that bit more. However, I expect that defenders will have to close out on Dillingham, and he certainly understands how to attack a shifting defense. That electric first step, which I mentioned earlier, comes into play here since Dillingham can easily get by his man on the perimeter. Once he's inside, from there he can both score and facilitate. Given Dillingham's dimensions, he stands at around 6'1" with a slight 176-pound frame. It's natural to question how he fares in the paint. However, with his skill set and speed, I really trust Dillingham to put pressure on the rim. For a lot of his freshman season, we've seen how the Kentucky guard has a wide array of counters to finish over length. An important one is his floater. With this, he reminds me of LaMelo Ball, as well as his rhythm and how he breaks defenders down off the dribble. Another big component is how Dillingham changes speeds. He can abruptly put on the brakes and get his defender off balance. So far, Dillingham is making about 55% of his shots at the rim, creating nearly 6 in 10 of those looks for himself. As we'll get into, he does not always convert, but he's been quite impressive. Already, we've seen Rob use hezzies, spins, step-throughs, jump stops, and change up the length of his steps to get into the paint. And then he has that floater, a nice scoop finish which he can turn to, and some physicality which cannot be ignored. This all translates as well to situations in the open court. Dillingham really fits the up and down nature of the NBA with his velocity and ball handling. And here, when he's playing in transition, usually he also has less bodies to deal with, so he gets even more out of these tools close to the basket. But although Dillingham pressurizes the rim often, it's more than fair to wonder whether he'll be able to consistently make shots at the basket in the NBA. Like I just said, I see some flashes of a tiny LaMelo Ball in Dillingham, but keep in mind that part of why LaMelo is so lethal is because he's around 6'7". Kentucky lists Dillingham at 6'3", but that is very generous, and I would expect him to be at the absolute most 6'2" in shoes. Despite being explosive, Rob is still a below-the-rim athlete for functional purposes. He's fast, but he can get bumped off his spots since he's still very wiry, and I'm not sure how much that will ever change. Going forward, I also want to see improvements to Dillingham's left hand. He needs to get more comfortable there as he looks to finish right even when he gets into the left lane. Diving into Dillingham's playmaking, this is yet another question which I think he successfully answered at Kentucky. As a freshman, Dillingham is averaging nearly 4 assists to 2 turnovers per game. The numbers are very encouraging, but also I think he passes the eye test in regards to his facilitating. Rob is creative, playing out of the pick and roll, and he has NBA bigs at Kentucky, so I think a lot of his reads are translatable. This includes rollers, but also to bigs who pop. I like how Dillingham creates threes for his team, and here he uses that same downhill speed and creativity that is apparent in the rest of his game. But the thing is, his lack of strength and his dribble-heavy style that show up with his scoring can also get him into trouble sometimes playmaking. Dillingham still lacks comfort in traffic, and he can overcomplicate things for himself, leading to turnovers. Broadly speaking, I think his reads are good, but Rob's execution can be a little haywire. He might end up as more of a Lou Williams than a Trae Young, but still, I trust that Dillingham is going to get legit point guard reps at the next level. Defensively, I actually think Rob Dillingham is a very straightforward prospect. If you're skinny and around 6 feet tall in today's NBA, you're going to encounter issues on this side of the ball. This is already the case for Dillingham in college, and it will be the case in the NBA looking ahead. Then, not only is Dillingham small, he's also never really defended in his life until he got to Kentucky. Rob gambles, he falls asleep, he can be at fault for miscommunications, and he's inconsistent with his effort, which he would much rather dedicate to the other end of the floor. Everything I just mentioned is particularly apparent off the ball. To give Dillingham credit, I actually think he's been better than expected at the college level, but his baseline right now is still very low. However, there have been some small improvements which are encouraging to an extent. To be clear, none of this relates to Dillingham suddenly becoming a lockdown or even a consistently passable defender, but I do think he's shown more on-ball concentration at Kentucky. He's not been a total disaster by any means, and then he can make up for his defensive lapses in the passing lanes or simply on offense. Rob is strictly a positional defender, and NBA point guards are going to be bigger than he is, but I have appreciated the times where he slid with a drive or tried hard to get a stop. Make no mistake though, Dillingham's outlook on defense is grim. In the league, he might be the only guard-sized player on the floor sometimes, and even then he'll be small, so there's no way for him to be hidden like at Kentucky, where he shares the floor with DJ Wagner and Reed Shepherd. Even when Dillingham makes an effort, at the end of the day, he's just too small. And this applies to everything: his height, his length, and his overall frame. So, despite the fact that Dillingham will probably never be a contributor on defense, I think he's too talented to not be a lottery pick. I cannot get to the point where I consider Rob a top 10 lock, because think of how many 6-foot guards are successful in today's NBA, but he puts constant pressure on the rim, he can create his own shot from the mid-range and from 3, and he's been much more willing to play off the ball and buy into playing unselfishly. On top of that, Dillingham is a talented passer, and he creates constant advantages with his speed, handle, shooting, and creativity. As always, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like, make sure to leave a comment telling me what you think of Rob Dillingham, and if you enjoy the channel, if you want to watch more content like this, make sure to subscribe. Take care, and I'll catch you guys next time.